here the Duchess is going to do a little bit of work on one of her recent paintings, and she's going to take it away. Thank you for coming back to Museum Diaries.
Hi, this is the Duchess, and today what I'm doing is I'm working on my second piece to a collection. This is red latex gloves. The first one was the portrait of Jackie and the Aztec face. Now this is the second one, and what I'm doing with each of these is I incorporate a red latex glove. And if you notice, I have different canvases underneath me, and I utilize these to clean my brushes, but not just clean my brushes. I'm actually doing other pieces simultaneously, but they're different types of styles. Okay, so that one has more than enough orange, so I'm going to put yellow there later. Next I'm going to add some white to pick up that color because it's too dense right now, that orange tone. So by adding the white over it, I can help fade it out, and then I'll add more yellow on top. But it has a nice texture and a nice feel to it when you lay multiple colors on top of each other. Now right now you see it looks stripped. I don't like that. So what you do with acrylic paint is you wet your painting cloth, and then you can literally pull off whatever, if you're oversaturating with the color. Okay, like right there it's a little oversaturated, so I will fix that later. Now what I have over here is a white acrylic house paint, and this has a density to it that I really like, that you can't get with just using titanium white by Winsor Newton or zinc white. What I like to do is get a nice upscale house white that is indoor outdoor, and it's a high grade paint, but by allowing it to dehydrate some, it's not as wet, so it's able to give me more of a white intensity than I can with my regular paints. So you can see how thick that white lays. And this is, I wouldn't even say that it's really impressionistic. In a way it is, because you have something that resembles a hand. But it's really more abstract because I'm not really trying to convey anything per se. It's more, it's working more on emotional content. Which to me serves me better if I'm doing abstract. Although I do use emotion for all of my paintings, it's a free form emotion when I'm doing more abstract type work. And I do multiple paintings simultaneously. So I've got this one. This is obviously surreal. It's a face of a person, and there's people inside of these windows. So, you know, they say the eyes are the windows to the soul. So anyway, these have basic references to that. And then I've got AOL, which she's not done yet, but that's more realism. And so like I say, this would be, to me, more of an abstract, not surrealistic or impressionistic. You know, it's kind of semi-impressionistic, and it's really strange because those terms that they teach you in school, it's like, oh, this is an abstract, or this is an impressionist. There's so many misinterpretations of those terms that I'm really cautious to use either of those labels when I try to define an art piece. But, you know, at some point, obviously, you have to when you're talking about your art piece and they can't see it. So, for me, this is what I would call more of an abstract impressionist piece. And if you look at this, it almost looks like a name, but it's not. It's just linear and curvature that conveys a certain feel, and that's all I'm striving to do. I'm not trying to make a political statement or anything like that. So this gets worked on and worked on and worked on, and it goes layer after layer. And for most of my paintings, I probably do like something like this. By the time this is complete, it'll have about 18 to 20 layers of paint. This will probably only have about 8 or 10 layers. So different things, like if I do realism, it can work, I can do 30 layers of different colored paints. So it's layering with paint for me is part of what I enjoy, and it's part of why I paint. I just feel like I can get more out of a painting and an image by using the layering of colors. And so colors that you wouldn't think like would be part of a flesh tone, I'll use greens and purples and yellows and oranges and browns and black. I use a full spectrum of colors when I do flesh usually. I find that if you don't layer it with multiple colors, that it has more of a flat appearance, even if you are doing, you're specifically looking to get a realistic image. I feel personally that if you are reducing your palette to just a few colors to do a person's face, for example, it doesn't feel like it's alive for me personally. It feels more like it's, I don't know. It just doesn't feel as much like art, but that's just my opinion. And God knows there are brilliant artists that don't, they totally restrict their palette, and I've done that too, where you're only using certain color tones for the piece. But I did that more as an art exercise because I'd heard about that, and I'm a self-taught artist, so you hear about these different techniques that other artists use, and then you try to find out about them, and you teach yourself to the best of your ability, and some things you'll keep in your box of secrets, for your art, because I think every artist has a box of secrets of how we create different looks of different objects and different substances, and surfaces and anyway, Jax had asked that I share some of my painting, which, I'm reluctant because, I'm basically a closet kind of person, I tend to try to live a very isolated and closed life, simply because having spent the majority of my life locked up with other human beings, you really crave privacy. So people used to say, how did you do all those years in isolation? And to me, isolation is one of my favorite things, in life. So the only thing that was bad in isolation, besides the interminable cold and starvation and cruelties, beyond that kind of shit, the worst part were the noises that your neighbors make by beating their heads against concrete walls, or self-mutilating, or screams, and other people that are trying to incite, a weaker person to self-abuse. That's the most disturbing of all of the sounds, I think. You know, anyway, I just prefer my privacy, and I prefer my isolation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with just myself. I just enjoy certain people's company, and I'll spend, 20 hours a day with somebody for months on end, just because I enjoy their company, and I don't get bored, I don't get tired of their company. My late husband Jake and I, we could do that together, and that is, I think, why we had such a successful marriage and why we stayed in love. We both craved that privacy, but yet when we wanted to join in conversation with someone else, we always had each other or a close friend. And then we did volunteer work, which is always a wonderful thing to do, is to help give to your community. It helps your soul and your mental hygiene and health and your growth as a human being. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I just went over some of the gray tone, and I don't like that. So now what I have to do is I'm going to use my wet paint cloth, and I'm going to remove some of this white layer where it overspread. And you can get different things that you use to block off your painting so that you don't get these kinds of smears, but I don't particularly like that, using those plastics to seal off my painting. I prefer doing everything by hand and by eye. But that's just my own old-fashioned methodology. It's certainly much harder than if I'm buying the products that you can now buy and tape off your color areas and say, oh, I don't want to get this color on top of that color. It's just my own preference. I like to do things the hard way. Maybe in some instances, I think I definitely do like to do things the hard way. You seem to, at least for me, I like to learn by trial and error. I think that method of learning stays with you longer and makes more of an impact. I don't know whether that's true or not, but certainly for me it is true. And everybody's brain, works differently. We're not all the same. Anyway, I got some news about my brain illness, and I have to read up on it. And there's nothing they can do. They're putting me in some type of cognitive rehab, I guess, where it's supposed to help me for the damage that has happened by the physical crashings to my skull and brain. It damages the brain. So anyway, so I didn't share a lot with you guys, but I hope it was okay. And like I say, I'm not into this kind of interviewing or talking, so I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you for joining me.